Netflix. According to the most up-to-date Alexa site popularity rankings, it is the 43rd most visited website in the world by traffic, and the 11th in the United States. At Georgia Tech, during the peak hours between 7 p.m. and 12 p.m., the video host accounts for 2/3 of the bandwidth consumed, and 36% nationwide. There's no hiding that the disc rental service turned streaming site has tapped into a market that would not be possible without the ever-increasing power of the internet. The $2.11 billion company is leading the charge everywhere for people cutting cords, a movement that mainly exists due to the ever-expanding library of first-party content that it creates. Back in 2011, Netflix decided to move into original content with its first foray, the critically acclaimed House of Cards starring Kevin Spacey. However, this show was different from the previous. It focused less on self-contained episode plotlines and more on season-long plot arcs that, when combined with all of the episodes being immediately watchable, not only allowed, but possibly encouraged viewers to sit through the entire season at once. This newly cultivated culture of watching long hours of content has created a culture of quote-unquote binge watching. And that brings me to the subject of this video, the 2016 science fiction horror series Stranger Things by the Duffer Brothers. As a tribute to 80s films, it overwhelmingly succeeds, but on an additional level it also further exemplifies the bingeable plot structure that began with House of Cards. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, you have been warned. Running 8 chapters long, the show has 3 distinct yet interwoven plotlines that all seem to be their own separate 80s movie stereotype. The kids draw heavily from The Goonies and E.T., Jonathan, Nancy, and Steve from Ferris Bueller's Day Off and The Breakfast Club, and lastly, Joyce and Hopper from Alien and The Thing. But why structure the show in this way? If film is a series of choices, then why make 3 separate stories instead of focusing on just one? Michael Haig, a story consultant for Hollywood, describes the syndicated TV show as a series of stages as shown using NCIS. The setup, the opportunity, the new situation, the change of plans, the outer motivation, and the major setback. Stranger Things and HBO's Game of Thrones both play with this structure though, and I think this is intentional in both cases. By presenting the episodes in a chapter format, it encourages watching multiple episodes at once by putting the resolution to certain plot points in the next episode. When Nancy crosses into the Upside Down, this is the major setback for the TV show, but it's intentionally left unresolved to be visited in the next chapter. While the cliffhanger isn't a new concept, the fact that you have the next episode immediately available at your fingertips makes it even more tempting to go ahead and keep watching. Stranger Things isn't the first piece of media to utilize a chapter format either. Quentin Tarantino loves the use of chapters in his films. I'll focus on his 1992 film Reservoir Dogs, but he also makes extensive use of them in Inglourious Basterds and in The Hateful Eight. It works in these films by allowing Tarantino to quickly change both the setting and character focus of the story, much in the same way that a book can. By having clear segments in each portion, it allows the viewer to make mental progress of the film's journey, necessary in some of Tarantino's sometimes 3-hour-long films. For Reservoir Dogs, he uses the title card flashback to introduce backstory on characters that ends up being crucial later in the movie, but also keeps the audience in suspense for the return to the warehouse. He reveals that Mr. Orange is a cop, then runs you through his backstory before flashing back to him bleeding on the warehouse floor. How does this relate to Stranger Things though? In my opinion, the Duffer Brothers use it for pacing to keep the viewers glued to the screen. By jumping between the separate plot lines, it constantly keeps the viewer interested, making them wonder what is happening to the other characters off screen. It's easy to lose track of time both inside the show and outside. All of the events on screen happen over the span of a single week. Netflix has done studies on this as well. On their binge scale, horror, sci-fi, and thriller rate higher than any other genres for binge watching, which Netflix defines as watching more than 2 hours of a show in a day. And what is Stranger Things but a blend of all of the above, with some 80s pandering mixed in? You can see in the way that the episodes are structured that the writers had this in mind. For a good example, the end of Chapter 5 and the beginning of Chapter 6 are functionally one scene. The climaxes of each storyline are spaced out during the middle of an episode, making the work as a whole feel like an 8-hour-long movie rather than a TV show. And just like a Tarantino film, even though there are distinctive chapters, the storyline is very unepisodic in nature. If the title cards and credits were cut out, the work as a whole could be watched end to end without there being a jarring change in pace. As online distribution becomes cheaper and more prevalent, this binge-oriented story style is going to be the new norm as both Netflix and writers become more accustomed to designing scripts around it. With additional first-party works being added every couple of weeks, the progress shows no signs of slowing down as the velocity of subscribers grows ever more, even as more people are brought into the fold of binge watching.